spoil it.
I know, right? Ladies and gentlemen and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. My name is Rotten Deadite, and with me today are...
I am Andrew, also known as the White Guar.
I am James, also known as Aramithius.
I am Felix, also known as Banu Hana Masaishi.
And this is Jonathan, also known as Sothis.
And today we're talking about Sheogorath. It's been 84 years. It's been a few weeks since we last did a cast, and
our beards are fuller, our hair is curlier,
and we're all we've all slept a lot less because stuff has happened, so I think it's fitting, considering the complete fucking insanity of my country right now, that we talk about the Lord of Nutso. I mean, if you've played any Elder Scrolls game, you know who Sheogorath is. He's, like, easily the fan favorite Daedric Prince. He's one of the favorite characters in the entire series. When I first started playing ESO, I remember the day one when I first rolled my first character, I kind of had a scrolling number in my head of how long will it be until I run into Sheogorath. Like, I knew it was going to happen. So it's no surprise that he plays a major role in quite a few quests in Elder Scrolls Online, and a couple in the single-player games as well. So if I were to summarize Sheogorath very quickly, without using the word cheese, I would say that he was supposed to be the Lord of, or he's supposed to be the Daedric Prince of insanity or madness. The Elder Scrolls games series, the entire series, has given him various titles, such as we all know him as the Fourth Corner of the House of Troubles, but we'll get into the Dunmer lore in a second. Don't get me started. The Skooma Cat by the Khajiit, the Lord of Never There, Raver, the Comforter of Men, and the Sovereign of the Shivering Isles. And this is all, I mean, isn't
he just the divine spark of madness?
We've gotten some of that. We've gotten, what is it, the Sithis-shaped hole?
That's it.
Oh goodness, he's sometimes referred to as the Mad Star, the Mad Lord, the Mad One, the Mad God, and another mad world. So yeah, he's supposed to be the Daedric Prince who encourages or resides over things that are nuts. But what's he actually like? What's the actual practical stories that we have about Sheogorath? What does he actually do? And the answer is he does whatever the writers and the development team think, you know, is about, like, insanity. We'll see you in a second, James. Which frequently has nothing to do with actual mental illness. And so, as I usually like to do when I first start off each of these Daedric Prince casts, I like to shit all over them. And Sheogorath is not really is actually one that I have a huge bone to pick, partially because my mother is a licensed clinical social worker, so I grew up with a lot of mental health, like, you know, stuff around the house, and I helped her study through her certifications, one of her certifications, and through a lot of college. So discovering that Sheogorath in the Elder Scrolls is supposed to deal with mental illness and instead is about cheese and memes is disappointing. And I'd absolutely despise the character if it wasn't so fucking great.
Although, in fairness, it depends. I've seen multiple posts on
That's actually one of the things
Reddit.
I just wanted to bring up, is that I'd say probably about 75% of the content written about Sheogorath is meme lord stuff and goofiness and the Joker from Batman. But about 25% of it is legit good. It's actual honest-to-God mental illness. There's the, what was his name? He was an emperor.
Pelagius.
Pelagius the third?
I think so, yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Pelagius III is a great example of Sheogorath going out of his way to literally drive somebody nuts. And it's... go ahead.
Well, okay. Finish your thought, because I have a few points to touch on.
Well, whether or not, well, I'll say this: whether or not Sheogorath's goal as the Daedric Prince of Madness is to either get people to misbehave in unpredictable ways or to create mental health issues is, I mean, it's honestly kind of like, I mean, the more the former and the latter 9 times out of 10. And even Pelagius the Third's story tends to sort of stray towards, I mean, you know, just Sheogorath fucking with somebody. But it does seem like, unless my recollection of the Pelagius the Third story is inaccurate, which it probably is, honestly, considering the way my memory works, it seemed as if Sheogorath was just exploiting an already problematic mind.
Yeah, because with Pelagius the Third, there's some indications that it's not actually got anything to do with Sheogorath. There was thoughts that Potema was behind it,
right?
And various other things. So Sheogorath is responsible for madness, just not all madness.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the thing that I wanted to touch on with regards to that story is that in terms of what you do in the quest, and even Sheogorath admits this, he says, "Congratulations, you've helped fix his mind. He should sleep a bit better now."
Yeah.
He's actually kind of directing you to help Pelagius as opposed to like, look, I'm just a fucking nutter. What can I say? I'm so random. Like,
I'm enjoying myself.
Yes, you're entirely brilliant,
orderly.
conquering madness and all that, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that sense, he's actually helping. And also to touch back on an earlier point that Chris was saying about, you know, what's Sheogorath's role in terms of madness and how there's like some really bad, you know, memes and stuff, like all the cheese memes and everything. But what's the sort of really good underpinnings that we see either from the Shivering Isles or from earlier games?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day in the Elder Scrolls universe, one of the great underpinnings of the realization of the world is a inherently contradictory and mad statement, which is that you simultaneously do exist and don't exist in the dream of like a god that is dreaming you in this entire world. That is mad. That is mad to try and process. That is mad to try and understand and make sense of. There's an inherent madness in the nature of this world and, you know, the mentality, like hence why he's, you know, the Sithis shaped hole in the heart where madness springs forth from and all these other different things, because everyone has a little bit of that in their mind somewhere, whether it's in the form of an intrusive thought or contradictory beliefs and, you know, hence like mental gymnastics and stuff like that. There's that underpinning that's there that never really gets talked about because I guess for whatever reason in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, they decided, yeah, you know what, let's just make him a meme lord. Whereas I remember him as being this I really like the way Sheogorath was portrayed in Morrowind, where he's like this sort of well put together human looking man with a cane, like, you know, this nice sort of vest. He looks kind of like, you know, a classic Englishman or something from like the 18th century. And he speaks so softly and reverently. And he's like, so madness has brought you to this place. And I'm like, wait, what? And then he talks about some other stuff. Says, find me the folk of Horpellation. You're like, okay, this is kind of weird. But it's the way he talks and says things and how he's like put together that I found to be very intriguing in that regard. And I just wanted to bring that up in comparison to the man is not all memes.
Yeah. Although I think that's possibly touching on what I seem to remember as the original conception of Sheogorath, that he was the Daedric Lord of Madness, but he was not himself insane. That it was the idea his sphere was madness. He was promoting insanity, mental instability, and so on and so forth, but was not himself crazy. That is a later development, as far as I understand it, because you read things like the 16 Accords of Madness. He has a very good understanding of what drives people crazy, and he's quite methodical about how he does all of those. I can't quite remember the quest, his quest in Morrowind, but if it's following that same sort of pattern, it would be right. And this needs to happen in order for more people to be made mad. And so it follows that mold of he's there to promote it, but he's not actually a victim himself. Right. He's kind of the eye of the storm sort of thing.
Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it too. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Something I want to point out. I wrote an article a long time ago. God, how long ago was this? Like two years ago. that was kind of a critical analysis of Sheogorath. And kind of going off of what you said earlier, Chris, is kind of the disparity between madness that Sheogorath represents and mental illness. And I tried to point out that I mean the mental illnesses that we're familiar with and we understand now in a psychological sense. You know, the words like madness and insanity are more archaic ways to refer to those things, and in an almost derogatory sense. And so I remember I added a disclaimer that I'm not saying that people with mental illness are insane, just that these phrases that are archaic ways to think of mental illness are what Sheogorath is associated with.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good point.
This whole article, I'll drop it in the Twitch chat here. So
hey, there it is.
the whole thing is I point out how I'm disappointed in the lol random XD, you know, kind of presentation that we're given, starting with Oblivion, like Felix said, and you know, it turns into cheese and just randomness, random access humor, which seems to do a disservice to the concept of mental illness in general. And I mean, I made a point of pointing out that mental illness is a scary thing. It's terrifying.
It certainly can be.
Yeah, and I went into an anecdote of how I had a grandfather who had dementia, and he eventually died from it. But you know, one of the last memories I have of him was him repeatedly asking me the same question after I'd already answered, and the question didn't actually apply to me. He said, "Oh, well, how's life in New York?" And I had never lived in New York. And so eventually I just said, "Well, it's fine, Grandpa. Thanks for asking."
Yeah.
Because at that point, you know, it's easier to just let him settle into
feel
it
safer,
rather than constantly, you know, frustrate him with you know, a reminder of what he's going through.
Yeah, a lot of the I don't want to use the word violence, but the energy of dementia can sometimes be worsened by that feeling of panic when you say, "Dad, I've never been to New York," and then he's like, "Wait, what the fuck is going on?" And that just makes the symptoms even worse.
Yeah.
So
so I used that as a reason for why Sheogorath should be more terrifying. Yes, he's unpredictable, and like we see with Pelagius, he can do something good, but whether that's his intent, I mean, you know, does morality even apply to Sheogorath? Because if he's off the wall crazy, then I mean, how can we hold him to a moral standard, which defaults him to something kind of negative?
If he's dysfunctional,
but
also, sorry to interject real quick, but with regards to the Pelagius the Third story, well, it could be, you know, you helped him, you know, settle his mind a bit more. That could also be interpreted with a follow-up of, which means now he's more cold and calculating to actually be more coherent as a despotic and mad tyrannical ruler, because instead of just succumbing to his visions of like, I need to be restrained, it's now like, everyone's out to get me, that's why I need to kill them. How do I kill them? Okay, here's how I do it, right? Like, there's obviously that could be a worse way of it, which brings it back to your point of, can we even hold Sheogorath morally accountable? And that was just the one little interjection I wanted to throw in there.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is you know, I can think of no worse way to go than to lose yourself bit by bit. You lose your memories, you lose all the things that make you, right? And that was what my grandfather was going through, whether he knew it or not. And I don't think he did, and I think I made the point of quoting Sheogorath, a bitter mercy perhaps, but a mercy nonetheless. That he wasn't necessarily aware it was happening, but you know, that kind of mental horror is something that I want to see more in Sheogorath. I mean, it's and it's a thing that's got to be approached cleverly. It's got to be, you know, it can't be just random, you know, cheese.
Yeah.
You know, because that doesn't, that undersells it, and that changes the point of the character.
It's a missed opportunity at the very least.
Yeah. It depends, because I just want to be completely contrarian here and say that I've seen multiple things where people have related to the cheese Sheogorath, because it relates to their condition. I've seen people like say ADHD, bipolar, and say that actually matches my experience.
Right.
Yeah.
So are we perhaps coming at this with some prepackaged expectations of what we're thinking of as madness, and thinking that it needs to be arch, it needs to be word salad, it needs to be whatever, rather than something that something that is close to the lived experience of. So I don't necessarily want to devalue the current.
I came prepared for this.
I'll get you real quick, Felix, but I just wanted to mention something, that there's actually been some conversations going on in chat that are unbelievably good right now.
Yes.
And one of them is something brought up by Owain here, is that there's a Victorian and older definition of madness which has nothing to do with mental illness, but it's a horribly regressive concept, true, but it is applied to anyone who would engage in violence that was not one of the many ways society condoned violence. For, in other words, a peasant killing a lord must be mad, but a lord killing a peasant is just taking advantage of his privilege. Yeah. And that sort of feeds into one of the things that we do need to talk about what we should address about mental illness in the Elder Scrolls universe and in our universe, which is that mental illness is dominantly defined as a function of culture. So it's how our culture defines acceptable and unacceptable behavior. Okay. And you can call acceptable and unacceptable different things. It's constructive, it's not constructive, it's disruptive, it's not disruptive, et cetera, et cetera.
Kind of an unspoken social contract.
Right. But, well, it's not unspoken, it's defined in the DSM-5. In a giant manual which literally tells you if people exhibit behavior on these spectrums and have, ideally speaking, the following like organic features, like an a disinclination to absorb a certain a certain chemical in the brain or something, these kind of things, then that evidence leads us to calculate that they are therefore exhibiting behavior consistent with within the spectrum of blah, of narcissism or psychosis or something like, et cetera, et cetera. And if a person falls neatly into a definition in the DSM-5, which almost never happens, but sometimes, then it allows social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists to create a treatment method which they can then apply and hopefully see positive results. Some of those some of the way that they identify dysfunction in the DSM-5 is literally by saying if they react positively to this particular medication, then they're probably... So, like, there is a little bit of experimentation that has to happen. When you say, well, you didn't like this pill, let's try this pill. Oh, that worked. Well, I think therefore you have this. So the end result is that there's a tendency for some dysfunction to be ignored or downplayed until a new version of the DSM comes out, and then all of a sudden it's a problem, or then all of a sudden it requires a certain reaction legally from certain organizations. And what that means is that the line that our culture creates to define insanity has shifted slightly in one direction or the other. It's very similar in the Elder Scrolls, where there has to be for anybody to be defined as being nuts in the Elder Scrolls universe. There has to be an agreement among an organization of people about what nuts is. And like Owain pointed out, there could be lords who go out and kill random there could be some Breton lord out there who just enjoys stabbing people with forks, and so long as he's not stabbing his peers, then everything's hunky-dory. But because he's stabbing peasants and fuck peasants, But if they're, but the moment he stabs one of his friends at the dinner table, it's all of a sudden it's a fucking problem. I mean, let's be honest with you, Breton culture being the way it is, the first couple of times he stabs somebody, it's going to be, oh, you kook. And then it's not going to be funny anymore after that.
Because then you just get that achievement for serial killing.
Right. Well, you know what they say, the difference between an insane person and an eccentric person is how much money they have?
Yes.
Yeah. So insanity and eccentricity is how much money you have. And I mean, that to a degree, as Owain has probably pointed out at some point, and I probably missed it, is that, the DSM-5 is like a map. It's not a gospel that is true, but it's a way of finding your way. But if it is a map, it's a way of finding your way to a crazy verdict,
And it's also kind of a symptom of something broader. If I can take that conversation a little wider, you're saying DSM-5 is the definition of mental illness, that's what everything goes by, and then XYZ medical stuff needs to happen, because our modern conception of mental illness is that this is a medical thing which needs to be treated as a medical thing. One of Foucault's works, which I absolutely love, is Madness and Civilization, and it kind of takes you through how all the various different societies throughout history have treated mad people. Sometimes they're seen as prophets or people who have been touched by the gods. There's people who have been seen as who've had unconventional yet very useful wisdom. That's where we get the idea of the court fool from. I mean, apart from being someone who can say what the hell they like to the monarch and get away with it in order to induce better perspectives to the monarch, because they have that kind of outsider perspective. Someone who's mentally ill is ideally suited to that, or what we would call mentally ill. Whereas we now call it mentally ill. If you go back to the Victorian era, you have things like attacks of the vapors and this sort of thing, which is an environmental cause for it, which isn't how, which is an internal cause. You have all these different causes for what we now call mental illness, and different quasi-medical or non-medical treatments for them.
Although, if I might interject for just a second, a lot of the Victorian angst around madness. I mean, if you read things like The Strange Case of Jekyll and Hyde, for example, a lot of it has to do with, strangely enough, the dichotomy between religion and science, which that difference was at its most palpable in the Victorian era, when we had a lot of the predecessors for science, and there was a lot of fanaticism and kind of romanticism about, okay, well, how far can this go? What does that mean? I mean, Dr. Jekyll was a mad scientist who killed his own morality to become Mr. Hyde. And so that is considered a madness. Hyde then tried to kill Jekyll and take over his body, even though they were the same guy. It's weird. It's not like a Bruce Banner Hulk situation. It's more complicated than that. But
there was a lot, if I recall correctly, I remember reading something about there being a lot of like cultural commentary happening in Jekyll and Hyde, which I didn't pick up on because I don't know the history.
So that's one thing I wanted to point out is, I mean, we can point, it's all cultural, but a lot of this, especially in the Victorian era, has to do with, the rise of science and kind of the honing down of scientific theory. Because, I mean, we get things like phrenology, the shape of your head and face shows what your personality is. And we know now that that's just a pseudoscience, reflexology and all of these things that just aren't really supported by modern science. But mesmerism is another one.
For thousands of years, people thought that the color of your skin determined how smart you were. I mean, I'm glad that we were able to that some of us are able to laugh at how impossibly stupid that is now. And in 100 years from now, people are going to find it fucking hilarious that people used to be that dumb. I hope. But that's what. Yeah, I know, right, Felix? But you and I are in the same level of pessimism at this point. But I think. Yeah, right. Okay, sorry. But so let's. Does anybody have any other thoughts? Because I want to try to move on to something that's a little bit more closer to Sheogorath and Elder Scrolls than just general.
Yeah, so that was kind of what that's kind of what I originally wanted to interject with after James's initial statement about throwing like our modern interpretations and how people view it as like, oh, you know what, like I have ADHD or something like this, and so I find some of this very relatable. Here's the unspoken secret about Sheogorath and madness and mental, disability, problems, whatever you want, however you choose to view it or categorize it. It is a broad swath. It ranges from dementia to memory loss to schizophrenia to hyperactivity. It is so vast. And in terms of using our modern applications on the world of the Elder Scrolls, like I get it, that's always something that we're going to have to struggle with in the game universe, because we just always have to filter that through our sociocultural lens. But with that in mind, in terms of how that applies to the in-game universe, I feel that it's very much left up to people's interpretation, how they want to see it. Some may take a more, as Andrew pointed out, a classically Victorian approach to interpreting madness in the games. Others, as we've seen with some people who do excellent writing on the Imperial Library or elsewhere, actually really delve into how horrifying Sheogorath and his realm can actually be. And for others, it's just like, I'm literally just here for the memes, because you know what? Why not? Existentialism is a fuck. Like,
yeah, right.
It's all valid.
Yeah.
So
damn you, Dan Brown.
I think I want to segue a little bit. So I've always had that problem that y'all have been talking about with the trying to relate mental illness to him. So I've actually done a lot of thinking about we have this vision of what we think Sheogorath should be with mental illness, but a lot of times, especially I know I do this a lot, I kind of just ignore what he actually is and what he's shown to be. And the thing I've kind of noticed is I'm not fully convinced anymore that he is actually about madness so much as that's just how mortals perceive it, because he's so ineffable. You can't quite tell what he's going to do or what his thought process is. And it's also sort of come to be it in a lot of stuff. Like, for example, when he tricks the other Daedra, we see this as he's this genius plotter who eventually is able to beat them at their own game. And
could you say the same thing about Lorcan?
You're jumping ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Stop it.
So we can't quite tell. So mortals can't really understand him at all. So yeah, he's more of this sort of realized chaos in the world, which leads directly into Lorcan and the Sithis-shaped hole. I think there are so many tie-ins to Lorcan with Sheogorath, like even beyond just the obvious Sithis-shaped hole stuff and the chaos side of things.
Spark of madness and all that.
The spark of madness, or Lorcan's divinity thrust into him. You've got Arden Soul, who goes through similar steps that Lorcan does, as sort of a mantling.
Yeah, it is mantling. He mantled him.
Right. It's well, I have thoughts on that. Maybe I'll get to, but it's sort of he has to Yeah, I guess it is. I guess it's definitely a type of mantling. And I know Lady Nerevar wrote that thing on Art and Soul and connecting to the Lorecon. And I think even the hero Kavach does basically the same thing. He mantles Pelinal, who is a Shezarene, which then connects him to Lorecon. I'd like to know what Haskell did personally.
I know.
I
We
love
probably
Haskell.
won't ever find that out, but I really want to know that one.
I kind of imagine Haskell as like a Saint George kind of figure, slaying the dragon, and then, like that.
Huh.
And then he, I don't know, like that's just kind of the idea I have, a chivalrous knight kind of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, even the Khajiit think he's dead.
Who?
Sheogorath.
Think he's dead?
Really?
Think he's dead? Yeah, he's dead.
Okay.
So the person that we see now. Here, hold on. I think I've got it here somewhere.
While he's quickly drying that up, one thing I want to add is that with regards to Sheogorath and Madness and Mania and how we see him in the Shivering Isles and talks of, he's this clever guy who managed to trick all the Daedra. There's another thing that I just want to briefly touch on, which is that they say, some people say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what the Kalpa is. The Kalpic cycle is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And Sheogorath is just there being like, really? Okay, you know what? Fuck it. You get the cheese.
Okay, so here we go. It's in the adversarial spirits.
Yeah.
The mind god, his sphere is the mortal mind and its stability. He tests Khajiit on the path by making them doubt the truth of their own thoughts, beliefs, and actions. He must be faced along the path to overcome before a Khajiit can visit Hermora's library. Some tribes believe Sheogorath is dead and has been replaced by something other.
Capital O other.
Capital O other.
Yeah.
And I think
that's some dank shit.
some dank shit. I think that I think he's tied into that cycle that you're sort of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It's sort of that along the lines that, like, I'm not totally convinced that the Shivering Isles Jigalag told us the truth or was right.
Oh yeah, no, I'm right there.
Yeah.
The Grey March is going to happen again. It's always going to happen. They're always connected.
Yeah.
This is something I get into a lot of arguments with.
It's just a new Sheogorath every time, I think.
Well,
or at least like a
replaced Sheogorath.
Replaced Sheogorath.
Well, see, I've always looked at it as Sheogorath is embodying multiple personality disorder, and
dissociative disorder. Yeah.
I want to tie it into his origins, but I mean we can get to that. So I mean we have Jigalag, and he realizes how nonsensical his sphere is, being a prince of order but also being a chaotic Daedra. And that drives him mad, according to one of the Clockwork Apostles in the Truth and Sequence. And then he becomes Sheogorath. His mind splits. Suddenly he has two personalities. And this keeps replicating until we get things like Haskell and Darius and the Champion of Cyrodiil. Because it's not necessarily, and people will talk about like, oh, well, it's canon that the Champion of Cyrodiil mantled Sheogorath. And I go, that's one interpretation. And yes, they tell us this, but they're also fucking insane. So why are we taking that seriously? And
just to give you an immediate and glib answer to that, because it's on the box.
Yeah.
Literally the collector's edition box of Oblivion says, do you or for the Shivering Isles says, do you want to take up the mantle of a god or something like that?
So I think
capitalized mantle.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between taking on the mantle and then the capitalized.
There's a difference between being Batman and being Bruce Wayne. That you can be Terry McGinnis and still be Batman, but you'll never be fucking Bruce Wayne. Sorry, bro.
I want to be Adam West.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh my god.
So what I'm trying to get around to is that the Gray March, it ends, but that's part of the Gray March. That's the signal that okay, this cycle is over. The real Sheogorath is out organizing his Legos and Lincoln Logs or whatever the fuck because he's Jigalag now. But eventually he's gonna come back. He's gonna kick the champion of Cyrodiil out of the throne and say, "Hey, you're part of me now. Go sit over there with Haskell because that's you and Haskell are the same sort of entity now."
Is just one thought on
Wait,
that.
no, I have something, but James got in first, so.
Is the Grey March a parody of the Kalpic cycle?
I think so. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Well,
Yes.
parody or a subgradient or something, yeah.
Yeah, like it's a gray march because what happens? Do they take over? I don't know. Maybe it's a gray area. But yeah, exactly. But here's sort of something that I'm not sure. Like this is admittedly something that I'm a little weak on because I haven't really studied or reinforced it. It's just something I kind of inherently believed after completing the quest line, and I've never revisited it. But I think that part of Jigalag's curse is that the Grey March never actually fully comes to completion because there is no full order in the Elder Scrolls universe the way it is, and that's why there's always a different Sheogorath. As the Grey March happens, Jigalag comes forth, and then that's the time for the new Sheogorath to come forward and, oh look, for the first time ever, you defeated Jigalag. Good on you. You get to be the mad god now. And then it happens a few more millennia, and then it's like, oh no, Jigalag is coming back. You gotta stop him. Oh, here's a new one to take up the mantle. Okay, see ya, have fun. Like that was the vibe I got, that the Grey March never actually ever comes to fruition. And then it's like, oh nope, like, you know, friendship ended with Sheogorath, now Jigalag is my best friend. Like it's not like that. It's more like he comes back, you stop him, and that's the rebirth of the new Sheogorath. That's how I've always interpreted that. So the Grey March never actually completes, which again, if you want to interpret that in a greater Kalpic cycle sense, then yeah, you know, until that method of insanity of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, until that is actually fundamentally changed through love or violence or some other means of reaching heaven, that's never going to happen.
So what you're saying is when you go into Sheogorath's castle, you're really going into a cave and talking to Sheogorath, father of Sheogorath?
Yeah.
Yes.
So wouldn't that imply...
You're welcome for the dope lore. I've done my job. Goodbye.
I feel like...
Yeah. Wouldn't that... Hold on. I may add to this a little bit. Wouldn't that imply that there are lots, potentially infinite Jigalags running around because they keep leaving to go do things? If every time there's a Grey March, there's another Jigalag coming out.
Wheels within wheels, my friend.
What if they're the Knights of Order and they lose their power as Jigalag, and then they come back as Knights of Order to serve the new Jigalag?
I mean,
hey.
That's a really nice idea. But yeah, and if we want to tie this into conceptualization and so on, madness or what some people will call madness. It's a horrible catch-all term at this point. We've talked that to death. But madness will often have its own logic. It's just that you don't accept the premises, like the whole idea of the Lord killing the peasant or the peasant killing the Lord sort of thing. You can have madness with logic. It's just that you don't accept the particular premises. And if we're thinking about Jigalag as a transition point to a new Sheogorath, then is it possible that the Grey March is just a redefinition of what it means to be mad? It's a paradigm shift. It's a way of changing the logic of the Erebus in some way from one form to another. Because one form of logic is madness from your current standpoint, because it doesn't make sense within your current paradigm. But you shift paradigms, and of course it makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know that I particularly like the idea that there's a new Sheogorath every time.
I don't know. I was just using Sheogorath as a metaphor for paradigms.
Well, so I guess that makes sense with how the fact that he comes along at every era. Like the end of an era basically until the Grey March was introduced in Shivering Isles.
Mortals
the end of
when eras are.
Right,
exactly.
An era was a very mortal-defined thing, but is it really? Because if that actually affects Sheogorath, it seems like it's more of a universal thing.
Well,
although
remember that the Arbus is deterministic.
Well, sure, but
Also,
like
the Maretha, like the Dawn era, was a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, time doesn't have any meaning in Oblivion. So if the Grey March happens every era in Oblivion, it's not that it's happening after a certain amount of time. It's that potentially that each Grey March is defining each era in its own way. So it doesn't have to be a set period of time as such. It just needs to be. It could potentially be both be 1,000 years or 1,000 of whatever unit of measurement you care to throw into Oblivion, which will get rid of all of its meaning, and also the different forms of political era, because they can be one and the same thing because time is flexible in Oblivion. So. And then again, it would also come back to the paradigm shifts. So when mortals declare that something is different now, which is basically what an era shift is, then you're changing your way of thought. And sorry, I'm just going back to my own ideas.
I was really just like reinforcing what you were saying. I kind of agree.
Cool. The point I'm trying to get to is that if we've got this multiple personality thing and we really wanted to punish Jigalag, then giving him momentary moments of clarity where he's off doing his thing is like, okay, I'm gonna fix all this shit that I screwed up while I was this other guy, James McAvoy in Split, and
I can touch on that.
and then when he can't finish because he has to turn back into Sheogorath and return to screwing things up, like that's kind of the ultimate fuck you, buddy. you take your punishment because you earned it or whatever. Like if I was gonna punish Jigalag a lot, that's what I would do. I would make him relive the same madness over and over again, because if you're so mad for so long and you don't have that moment of lucidity and clarity, you go, okay, no, that was crazy, then the madness loses its meaning as a punishment.
To sort of sidetrack ever so slightly off of these two nice little anecdotes that I saw in the chat just now. Someone, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but I'm probably butchering it. Martin de Bakker said Sheogorath is the mad god, but is the dragon too not mad? And then David the Ginger later on said the dragon is mad, so maybe Sheo's the connection, Lork's effect on Akka. And there is, an element of madness in Akatosh and the nature of time and breaking time into little shards and all these different little, terrible things you had to fix during, for example, the warp in the West and things like that. That's a good, not perspective, like a good way of helping to view Akatosh and how madness is not just limited to an individual, but it could be limited to a concept as well. But then to touch on to what Andrew was saying about, having moments of clarity. One of my grandmothers is currently going through, she doesn't really recognize it or accept it, but she is going through now, like it's past the early stages of dementia. We're definitely into like the middle stages of dementia. But I remember when it was first happening, like as the signs were worsening a couple years ago, I remember there were a few times where she would tell me during one of our little chit chats over tea or something, she would say, I can feel myself slipping, and that's terrifying to me, because, she would have these lucid moments and recognize, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, and that was only a few hours ago. I'm getting events and people and names mixed up in my head, and normally her memory is great, and even her long-term memory still is in pretty good condition. She can tell a story from, the 40s with such vivid clarity. It's impressive. But if you asked her, hey, what did you speak to so-and-so last week? She'll say, who? And like, what? No. So it's a problem. And yet she admitted to me a few times that, she was terrified that she could recognize in moments this you know, degradation of her own mind, which is really the truest version of herself, but she's no longer in control of that. And as a fiercely independent and self-driven woman, that's objectively terrifying to her. And I'm sure that's terrifying to, the rest of us, which is why, I would love to see more exploration of that concept of us not always being in control or being in the full reality of the moment. And this is where I get to now make a Joker reference. So that movie was really big for a lot of people, and one of the things that I like, if people haven't seen it yet, spoiler incoming, so just mute me for like a minute.
Which movie? You haven't actually said.
The most recent Joker movie.
Okay.
Yeah, like the just Joker. The one that made like incels happy for a few seconds before people realized it was actually about revolution, and then leftists in Latin America co-opted the Joker. Anyway, in that movie,
what channel are you on right now? Hold on.
and anyway, what ended up happening in that movie that I really liked was there's this scene where it's revealed that a lot of his experiences with another character were all dreamed up, and they were all in his mind. And so all of a sudden that brings forth, the unreliable narrator. Wait, what's actually real? What's actually happening? And so then when you see the final scenes of the film, you're left, if you've been paying attention, to confront yourself with the question, well, did any of that really happen?
Yeah.
Or was that just what he imagined in his mind? Which then brings us to the nature of the Shivering Isles quest line at all, is perhaps, the Shivering Isles and that portal weren't actually there for anyone else to see. It was Sheogorath calling out to you, because you're actually the one going mad. The people coming out of the portal, the guard defending it, how the realm is set up, could those all maybe have just been manifestations of your own hallucinatory fever dream as you mantle the god? Because that's what he needed from you. It wasn't actually anything that physically happened. It was all a mental thing, which is why there's the stealing of eyes in the quest line, and the Sheogorath you see in Skyrim has, gray eyes, kind of implying that he's blind in some way. Beyond that, tying into the concept of, the maiming and blinding of the witness in the enantiomorph, that's also saying that, this could have just been everything that was just in his head, or rather in the head of the Shezarine, the one who mantled Pelin. However you choose to sort of try and look at it and interpret it, that's something that always stood out to me in the wake of the Joker movie of, oh, hey, well, maybe it never actually happened. It was all in our mind. Dun, dun, dun. And that's my sidetrack.
Yeah. That's a hell of a sidetrack.
Sorry.
So.
Oh, sorry, eh?
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Don't you know? That's
okay, bud.
But
was that Minnesota? Somewhere that's practically Canada. Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota.
Southern Canada.
So I don't have I don't really feel inclined to go over Sheogorath's role in Khajiit or Dunmer culture, because they are, they're entirely predictable, really. I don't, unless you guys have something interesting to say about it, I don't like.
Well, I think it might be worth pointing out the couple origin myths that exist around Sheogorath, because they're kind of contradictory.
Oh yeah.
You mean very?
What's that?
Very contradictory.
Yes, very contradictory. Because I think in one, I don't remember what the source is. I'm pretty sure it was in the Shivering Isles. Jiggalag was like the strongest of the Daedra princes.
Yep. That's Sheogorath's own account.
Yeah. We don't like that you're stronger than all of us, so we're gonna gang up on you, and then we're going to force you into being the worst possible thing for your sphere, which would be Sheogorath. And then this is how Sheogorath was born. But then the Truth and Sequence that I mentioned earlier, which you can find in the Clockwork City DLC for ESL, it talks about how Jiggalag went mad in the knowing, referencing his his sphere, and how being a Daedra he was naturally chaotic. So how to reconcile those, or maybe it has more to do with an acknowledgement of the dream and state of existence or something like that. And that's what turned him into Sheogorath. So was he punished, or did he just go mad on his own?
Or did his wife just not care about the scars?
Yeah. What?
Right. To use another Joker reference, yeah.
Yes.
It's
just...
I was so confused for a second.
I don't know how I got these scars.
Yeah.
Mine was a bit.
Exactly.
And a drinker.
I'm not sure that it actually matters. Is kind of the point I was making there badly. That the idea that madness is just something that, and therefore Sheogorath is something that's inherent within the structure of the world, is just something that is just something that is. Does it really matter why it was brought about or how?
Yeah.
That it's something that I don't know whether it's necessarily something that was inevitable. Was it? I don't know.
I try to when we have conflicting accounts like that, I try to take the middle road, like maybe it's a little of column A, a little of column B.
You fucking centrist.
Pick a side. Sorry, go ahead.
Because a lot of these stories are going to have kernels of truth in them.
Mm-hmm.
It's which parts seriously, which parts are over exaggeration or misinterpretation or something like that.
Yeah, and doesn't Haskell even bring that up at some point? It's like, you mortals love to construct like worlds of conjecture off of a pebble of truth or something like that.
I think that was a jab at people like us specifically.
True, Haskell dunks on us regularly.
Yeah, that was Todd going, these fucking dorks,
fucking nerds.
They're in my chess club.
Oh, what was it? There was that early on. There was that ESO document that came out that felt a little bit like they were kind of making fun of us a little bit, but they did it in like this really like Vivekian language that like all the like hardcore nerds were just like, I'm okay with that. Like,
the only
I don't mind at all.
The only thing I can think of is the NPC in the Imperial City, who I don't think is there anymore, who talks about how Queen Irene is actually
that one.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he talks about it like he's some nut, and it's like, dude, why you gotta do us like that?
It's like I write dope out of game Redguard lore and expand on the culture for you, and this is how you repay me the disrespect, right?
Thor got bingo.
Yay, there it is.
Oh, hey.
Congrats.
Dunmer, Todd Howard, free space, audio issues, and dick joke.
Yeah. I don't even know when we made the dick joke, but I'm sure we made it. Yeah.
Well, Skelling got it too.
Remember when I said like the Muwatra thing earlier?
No, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that counts.
I love bingo.
but yeah, Jonathan, anything else you want to add? I know we've all kind of been like dominating things.
Oh no, it's fine. I don't know. You mentioned not talking about Khajiit, but I think he's a little different in Khajiit myth.
He's
specifically. What's that?
He's the skooma cat.
Yeah. Okay. So because doesn't that predate the existence of skooma in the first place?
Yeah, kind of. I do think it's kind of funny that he was the last one to be born, and then Anar was like, "Okay, we're done."
The next one's gonna be even more fucked up. Let's just stop here.
Yeah, like literally the line after Sheogorath is born is Anar going, "Yeah, no. Let's stop now." No. So there's like a few lines in the Spirit series that kind of make me think he's a little bit more in Khajiit myth, where, like, yeah, he's like that kid. That's why he's the kitten.
He's that kid?
No,
he's like
Dagon is the kitten.
He's like a kid. Well, kind of. He's. I guess he's more like the rowdy teenager.
Okay.
Okay.
He's doing stuff that adults just don't quite understand. But he's said to be the path that you have to go through in order to enter Hermora's library. Mm-hmm. So it almost seems like that's exactly what he is. He's the teenage phase of rebellion and figuring out your life. And it says he makes them doubt the truth of their own thoughts, beliefs, and actions, which is very teenagery. And then once you get older, you're wiser, and then you can get into Hermora's library, so you actually have more knowledge of the world. That's really it. That's all my thoughts on that.
Does that make him a liminal god? Because it was something that got said earlier. Just made me think because you were talking about Sheogorath not really relating properly to the world and mortals misunderstanding what Sheogorath is. But we've got, well, on Oblivion at least, you've got accounts of Daedra whose sphere is obscured to mortals. So we've got the position that people aren't afraid to say we don't understand this Daedra. So is it just a case of pure misinterpretation because you're not in the right place to understand what's going on? And the idea also that I'm really curious about why Khajiit and Dunmurray cultures see Sheogorath as effectively the same thing. They're there to test for mental weakness and so on. It's a guardian kind of role, a gatekeeper role as well, that he's kind of saying, no, you don't come through here unless you are mature, unless you understand something, and I'm going to screw with that understanding if you come anywhere near me, and then you come out the other side with a new understanding that is maturity, and so on. So yeah. Sorry, I don't know where I was going with this thought. It kind of rambled everywhere, and I'm most of a bottle of wine the other side. So
it's all right, Betty. Let it fly free.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? It's only like noon. Why are you drinking already?
Not in his end of the ocean, it ain't.
Yeah, like it's always 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
That place doesn't actually exist. There's only America.
Like what? 8 over there? Around 8 o'clock.
It is just past 8 o'clock where I am. Yes.
Yep.
I have world
5 hours difference
in my taskbar here, so I can.
Yep.
It's 5:11 a.m. in Tokyo right now.
Actually, Martin Backer actually has Martin Didabacker actually has a decent question about how the Kaimer venerate Sheogorath, and how does he relate? Because where he fits into Kaimer theology is something I'm constantly confused about with the House of Troubles. Because some places say that Veloth made the difference between good and bad Daedra, and some people say that there was a whole bunch of them that helped them out of Somerset. And so where does that difference lie? And Deadite, go.
Okay, so thank you. So basically, you can the Kaimer and the Dunmer both think of Daedric worship very similarly. There's not really much of a division between the approach that they take. The only actual difference that happens in Dunmer culture between the way that they approach Daedra is in the difference between Ashlander and House Tribunal Dunmer. So in the transition from Kaimer to Dunmer, there wasn't much of a change. So the Kaimer have the approach that they take to Daedra is that they are that each one serves a purpose, that they are useful, more useful than the Aedra, and that provided you understand I know, right, Andrew? And that provided you understand them, they can serve your goals better than the Aedra can, and that they are less likely to deceive you than the Aedra are, because they're less likely to lie to you, or that they're more forthcoming with the truth, or however you want to interpret it. So the reason why the original the good Daedra and the bad Daedra obviously are really, I mean, you could say that the bad Daedra are the four corners of the House of Troubles, but that's not really 100% accurate. The Dunmer think of many Daedra who aren't in the four corners as bad, but not. I mean, they're not a fan of Azura for fuck's sake, but they consider the four corners of the House of Troubles to be the worst of the bad Dunmer. And the reason why they venerate the four corners of the House of Troubles is for the same reason that you would venerate the god of hurricanes. It's that there's
testing gods.
Yeah, there's many reasons to venerate a god. One of them is to keep it satisfied so it doesn't fuck you.
Yeah. Making sacrifices to Red Mountain to
throwing people into a volcano if you want to use even more Dunmer, symbolism. Yeah.
I mean, I always interpreted the idea of like, why would they worship the four corners of the House of Troubles? It's kind of the same reason why, like in terms of like real quick to just cover the Dunmer stuff is. The four corners of the House of Troubles represent the struggles that are in your way towards achieving enlightenment. And so in that sense, it's the same with, Buddhists and, they're not really necessarily venerating bad gods or vices, but they're very much an important part of their belief structure because it's important to be aware of them and recognize that they're testing you in your faith as you try and achieve enlightenment. That's how I've always viewed it like that. But that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good way to put it, especially but I would suggest that is more consistent with the tribunal House Dunmer viewpoint.
Fair.
Because until Vivek showed up, I don't know for sure if the Dunmer had a very clear idea of Chim. I don't know for sure. I think they might have been sort of sidling along next to it, but I don't think they had exactly an idea of something that it was possible to attain.
Depends on how they were aware of triangles and the triangle truth and the good Daedra and an endomorph. So
it depends on how far you conflate Chim and the Psijic Endeavor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's really hard to precisely say what the thinking was at the time. It is certain that Vivek didn't invent Chim out of his asshole, but it's certainly it's hard to say. So I like the idea that the four corners of the House of Troubles are the ones that are most likely to that are the biggest problems to attaining enlightenment, but in the case of good Daedra, it was literally, these are Daedra. They're not necessarily just like Boethia. These are Daedra that will do you right if you do them right, and not try to, screw you over. There's no monkey's paw, bullshit happening, like, whatever. And they're and that they're useful in the respect that if you it's like they're like vending machines, man. You put 50 cents in it, you get a Snickers. I mean, that's the that they can be depended upon to complete the transaction. Whatever, yeah, you get Snickers from Daedra is what I'm. Yeah,
no, hang on, Chris. You put a Trinamac inside Boethia, you get a certain kind of Snickers at the other end.
Yeah, you get a Malakath, huh? Yeah.
Yay.
I was robbed of them in the Trinamac cast.
Poop jokes. All right. And so that's
probably another bingo right there.
So in the case of what Sheogorath does, it's a good question about how the Dunmer feel about Sheogorath. Is he there to is he there about like mental illness? Is he there for the purposes of I mean I'm sort of sketching the UESP notes here, but I mean I understand that he tests them for psychological weakness. I get that, but there's a lot of questions about whether or not that's an accurate description of what Sheogorath actually does for the Dunmer. I mean, you have to. I mean, one of the things that I've picked up on throughout this entire series and really just doing this cast in general is sometimes you kind of have to eyeball what I would call inconsistencies or a mixed, an inconsistent message in Elder Scrolls lore as like, you know, one author's interpretation of a thing may not match up with other authors' interpretations of things. And sometimes you get a situation where there's one author, like, for example, in ESO, who will write something about, like, Sheogorath, for example, that really doesn't hold up to anybody else's, and he only wrote it once, and it was just one little thing, and you can sit there and try to lore it, but eventually you got to get to the point where you just go, all right, I don't think this is worth trying to... Yeah. I don't think this is worth trying to, you know, incorporate into a worldview, you know. So yeah, does okay, sure. Did Malakath test your physical strength? Yeah, I guess. Yes. Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, he tested the Dunmer for physical weakness is one of the lines from the House of Troubles book. I'm kind of curious about why the Dunmer and the Khajiit have similar conceptions of Sheogorath. Because
I would imagine because they share a lot culturally. Like,
cultural appropriation.
Zura in a similar kind of sense.
It's not like the Khajiit slaves could go back with their Dunmeri understandings back to their homeland once they earned their freedom. That never happened. And elsewhere in Morrowind aren't that close together.
No, but cross-cultural exchange, even if it's unequal, is a thing.
Yeah.
That's why the American South has banjos and barbecue. They were appropriations from African instruments and food.
That's where barbecue comes from.
It could very easily be, if we want to use like a real-world alternative
example. Throw some French in there.
Yeah. Creole's from Canada.
Maybe the Velothi just walked through elsewhere on their way up.
Well, I'm basically just saying that
that's
like,
a roundabout route.
In terms of like,
if you get hella lost to do that.
Well, you know, it could have just taken them 40 years or something.
Look at curry in both India and Britain.
Yeah,
you got some cultural exchange right there. Like, they're both delicious, but.
And then you've got chicken marsala.
I feel obliged to say Bangladeshi at some point, but.
Okay, true.
Well, so the Khajiit view of Sheogorath that's so similar to the Velothi view, or the Dunmer view, is the pre-Radata view, though. So, like,
yes,
it seems more like the Khajiit view predates the Khmer view.
Well, hang on. When was Ridtharidata?
It was like first era, wasn't
he? I want to say yes, but
Khmer was Dawn era, wasn't it?
No. He was. No. He's the one. That's when basically the Khajiit culture shifted away from more traditional Khajiit to very Altmeri influenced.
Early second era.
Early second.
Which puts him post Khmer. Which puts him post Dunmer.
Right, so like all of that stuff that was all pre him, like that's pre Khmer as well, or at least maybe at the same time. It seems
the Khmer became the Dunmer before Ridtharidata.
Right, right. But I'm saying like the Khajiit view on him came from before Radata.
Yeah.
Like the whole
okay,
Spirits,
yeah.
The whole Spirits series of books is all
pre-Radata. Okay, so and we can't date when that started. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Then we're chasing wild geese there.
Yeah, okay. Another aspect of madness.
Yeah.
Hey, and wine.
Sure. But yeah, like it's kind of just in terms of like the writing and like cultural exchange and stuff like that. If it's, you know, Aldmeri Dominion and free flow of ideas and people across an empire, certain things are going to stick and be reinterpreted, right? And so that's why I wanted to just quickly make that real world interpretation of, you know, well, why does the American South have like certain things that have clearly come from Africa? Well, because of that bad part of their history. So it would make sense in terms of a just like culturally applied setting, like how cultures work in real life, to then transfer that to the world of Tamriel and specifically Morrowind and its enslavement of the Khajiit and Argonians, there would be a certain amount of, oh, okay, yeah, they bring that over. They even touch on this actually in ESO, where it's kind of left to your interpretation of, okay, so how much of the whole Redguard obsession with the stars was, before arriving in Hammerfell, and how much did they just co-opt from the Nedes or the Needs, however you choose to pronounce it, right? So it's left like, there's some stuff here that, there's, even though it's very unequal, and they make a point of reinforcing that, there is a level of cultural exchange. And we see that really everywhere in the world. For example, and it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen, to also cycle back to India briefly and Bangladesh, there are still British traditions that exist there, such as, for example, bagpipes, which you will see in Indian military parades. And there's nothing wilder than seeing an Indian man in a turban playing bagpipes, and there's 500 of them. It is jarring.
Are they good at it, though?
Are you kidding? Yeah.
Like they train for it.
Yeah, go for it.
But that's an example of, even though India was subjected by the British Empire for centuries, there are still things that they have brought over, and Britain as well has adopted certain things, like, again, curries, yoga. I'm not sure if any other words or terminologies apply. A greater awareness of spirituality was definitely fostered by the Beatles, of all people. Like, there's always some kind of cultural transfusion. So I could totally see why, like, early Khajiit and Khmer had sort of similar views on Daedra or certain aspects of the world.
So when did the Khmer or Dunmer start enslaving Khajiit? I don't actually know the answer to that. If it's even something we know.
So I don't think it is like specified, but I'm pretty sure it would probably be that they started enslaving Khajiit after they started enslaving Argonians, because they were right there on the border areas. And I would also say that it probably started with the advent of the great houses and sort of greater society, if you want to call that, because of the need for agriculture and labor for like mines and things like that.
So post change. So like Khmer didn't.
Yeah, I would say like until the what is it? The War of Red Mountain, or Battle of Red Mountain, like the change, whatever you want to call it, like that.
War of the First Council.
That's it. War of the First Council. Thank you.
Although in fairness, the Velothi high culture that built the strongholds existed prior to the War of the First Council. So
but those are strongholds, which, as I discussed in the Dunmer cast, that those were probably more like, because again, this is before like the separation between Ashlanders and Great Houses. That was kind of more like, oh shit, we got like a war going on. You got to come to these strongholds to hold our position until we finish the war, and then we can all go back to our little camps or settlements. That was what I argued the strongholds were, which is what they aren't used anymore, because Dunmer High society came after that with the Great Houses and Redoran and Dress and Indril all sort of defending the frontier. Those became largely unnecessary post War of the First Council,
right?
Which is why I think that, like, again, it's kind of like, hey, why do we need slaves to do the labor that we don't want to do? So that's going to be mining, agriculture, herding, things like that. Like, that's why it was a thing. And that's why I think at first they kind of just happily took them from the Argonians while they were securing their borders. And they're like, oh, these Argonians, and it's all swampy and they're terrible. You know what? We need to go raiding for slaves even further afield. And that's why there were slaves from not just the quote unquote slave coast of Africa, but as far east as Madagascar. And indigenous slavery was a thing in the Americas as well. So,
So going back to Sheogorath.
Yes.
It's got to be on Bingo too, isn't it?
Wildly off track, yeah.
Yeah. That's
but it's tangentially related because we were talking about the Dummer and like.
Oh yeah, no, like I can follow the lineage. Like I know how we got there.
But
the
yes, we're so wildly off track.
Pretty clear. But let's talk about artifacts.
The Wabbajack.
Yeah.
Guys, we got Wabbajack, we got Gamble Putty, we got the Forkahor Palation. You might say the Spear of Bitter Mercy, but I think that's more of a that's a Hirsine.
But it was given to him by Sheogorath, right?
Sheogorath.
No,
yeah, but
I
not
think
really.
I think it was Boethia.
In fairness, In fairness, the Spear of Bitter Mercy is kind of an interesting one because wouldn't you be mad to use a weapon that could kill you while you were hunting?
Oh, I mean,
apart from anything else.
Hey, listen, man, live free or die, like,
or just die.
Or just
live fast,
yeah.
die hard, something like that.
Live fat, die Yoganu, but yeah. Which is a
okay, then
no
there's
one's gonna
the
get.
staff of an actual staff of Sheogorath.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
The rod, the symbol of
yeah.
It's got
of Shiogorath.
The talking stick.
Oh yeah, isn't that like the staff that you have to recreate in the Shivering Islands station, where it's like, okay, gotta steal an eye, and like, okay.
Yeah, and which is. Sorry, I just had the sudden thing of that staff. If it's symbolic of Sheogorath, that the talking stick, the stick that you have to hold in order to be allowed to speak in group therapy sessions. But anyway,
no. So who
just
was
a
it?
pillow, you know.
Hockey stick.
Lady Nerevar argued that the staff was more Sheogorath than you actually are. Like it's the actual symbol of the status, sort of like the crown, I guess.
Right.
He's got an awful lot of staves, doesn't he? He's got Staff of got Wabbajack.
I mean, this is Elder Scrolls we're talking about.
The Staff of Everscamp.
Long pokey things are sort of a thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I mean, it's
also just giant
I mean,
hard rods.
Well,
thank you, Felix.
That's what towers are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to understand that, like, what from a design, the first thing place my mind goes is when a designer's thinking about what kind of like artifact to give to Sheogorath. They've got like, well, what can the player equip? And then it's like, well, is it going to be a sword? That doesn't fit his idiom. And is it going to be a shield? Fuck that.
You know,
you go through everything, and it's a mace, axe, no staff.
Well, the cane has existed since at least Daggerfall.
Yeah. Well, in the character art, yeah, but not as an item, I don't think, huh?
No, it wasn't an item, but it was in his character
Is the
art.
cane the same as the Staff of Sheogorath?
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be literally the thing he's carrying, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I ever made. I mean, the last time I played Shivering Isles was maybe 10 years ago.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
I want them to bring back canes into the Elder Scrolls games. Like, it was cool seeing it in Morrowind and in Oblivion, and also, yeah, but like a proper cane, and then also little known thing, cane fu or like cane fighting was actually a thing in gentlemanly times because like, I must defend myself and my honor. So like, introduce cane based combat. I want that.
I want spear animations. Your canes can wait.
What if we work together?
That's a great name for it.
Yeah.
The Neb Crescent.
Also, Andrew, is your kid just like practicing Naruto running in the back?
Oh, he's trying to stay out of the view of the camera for as long as possible. So he's
yes, Naruto running
to minimize his exposure on the screen.
Arms
He is
behind
precious.
Him. Yeah. The Neb Crescent is one that I've never heard of. What the fuck is this from?
The what?
What is
the
it?
Neb Crescent.
That might be like
16 it's mentioned in 16 Accords of Madness.
That Battle Spire kind of thing.
It's mentioned in 16 Accords of Madness. It describes it as being a seductive wide arc of honed steel that is intricately decorated. Oh, it sounds like the Daedric Crescent.
It's seductive.
That's kind of what I was thinking when I...
Hey man, if you don't like your ladies with curves, are you really living?
You put the Staff of Sheogorath in it, and
also in fairness, if we're talking about crescents and madness, you've got your link to the moons.
Yep.
There you go.
Sometime before the founding of the First Orsinium, the Orcish champion, etc., etc., etc.
Why was
performing deeds, etc., etc.
The Sheogorath.
Organ harps.
There you
There's
go.
that one too.
The blade made him black out mentally, and upon snapping out of it, discovered the corpse of a young orc woman that had her body mangled from the neck down. Realizing what he had done, Emig threw the sword into the snow and fled the scene in horror.
So it's a sword that turns you into Jack the Ripper. That's actually kind of a cool idea for a magic item. Just you wield this item, you lose yourself, you become a serial killer.
It's almost like in fairness, they've done losing yourself into a magic item before because they've got Umbra.
That's true. Yeah.
Also, for those who have been playing since Chris's time in the days before, In the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, like Prince
That's not
Ator is
metal.
literally a sword.
Yep.
What is?
Prince Ator.
Yeah,
Oh,
Prince
okay.
Ator, the man who fell while fighting against the Empire, he's literally reincarnated as a sword. Like it's him in the sword. It's like like for younger people, it's like the Finn sword from Adventure Time. It's like that.
Yeah, it's a talking sword. It's that old trope.
Like Lilorcore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got those in World of Warcraft right now.
You got Lilorcore in World of Warcraft?
And nobody cares. Yeah. None of you guys care about that, and neither does anybody else who's playing World of Warcraft right now. Oh, the sword talks. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, if they had the voice actor who did the Augur of the Obscure, then okay, I'd be a little more interested.
Yeah.
He is
Mm-hmm.
fucking excellent. Yeah, you know, like how I had to wait for him to leave.
I saw that. No, I got you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to cover? Yeah.
Doc, what's Tal
Super
Regor's
quick
voice
question.
actor named again?
Wes Johnson.
Lucas Schoenman.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Augur.
So-
I'm talking about Warframe. Yeah.
I thought you were talking about Sheogorath.
There's the one story about Sheogorath that claims that he invented music.
Yes,
When
that's
he
right.
ripped apart the woman
What?
Mm-hmm.
and made a harp out of her.
Yeah, and invented music.
No.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a great.
it's,
See, these were the stories about Sheogorath that made Shivering Isle Sheogorath so stupid.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
These
but-
stories are why.
He does say
actually-
he'd love to skip rope with your intestines, though.
That's
there was
true.
that.
I
he doesn't
actually want to.
do it.
I actually really want to bring up the Shivering Isles really quick because there was a lot about the Shivering Isles Sheogorath of like Scottish accents and memes that was very irritating. But what was very interesting about Shivering Isles was that it was one of the first. The idea of like splitting Shivering Isles in half. To follow like the pattern of like the what they call a it's not called bipolar anymore. It's not called manic depressive. I think it's called it's gonna. I think now the DSM calls it bipolar. I think I can't remember. But the idea of mania and depression being the two sides that you swing between. The fact that they accurately depicted mania as not high energy but rather like a high energy paranoia of like hyperactivity in the brain and everything is clicking over like 150%.
Yeah.
That's a really is it no dissociative identity disorder is what they used to call multiple personality disorder. The idea that just the fact that that's the way they wrote the Shivering Isles was very satisfying from a clinical point of view. That it wasn't just mania is everybody's happy and depression is everybody's sad. Neither state is good. Is basically the take home from that, which was nice.
Something I brought up in that article I wrote was that I mean mania. I mean
borderline personality.
I hesitate to call it more.
No, it's I'm pretty sure you're talking about bipolar.
I'm looking it up.
You also get to see a little bit of the other side.
It is bipolar. Yep.
Yeah, when you punch Sheogorath, like that was like the one time in that game where I was actually scared of Sheogorath because he's all like happy and well, very manic, really. And then if you hit him, he just totally changes his entire personality, gets super terrifying, and then throws you into the skies where you fall to your death.
I think what could have amped that up is if they did like a Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings Gandalf thing, like when Gandalf is yelling at Bilbo and like the shadows like grow and he like gets bigger.
Do not take me
and,
for
like,
some
I wanna
conjurer
see that
cheap
with
tricks.
Sheogorath, like you go, oh god, don't kill me.
Yeah. I mean, they did what they could, I think, but with the technology back then. But yeah, like it was like the one time I was actually scared of it. I'm like, oh shit, I done fucked up.
Yeah. I should not have done that. I regret things.
It's not really related to the stream, but I have a similar story of like how I managed to terrify one of my students in Spain, but we can save that for after the the stream, Jonathan,
Okay.
if you're interested. It's just a quick little anecdote, but it absolutely has no relevancy here beyond like, here's how Felix managed to like, craft a persona that allowed another student to be terrified of
Make
him.
a child cry. Good job, Felix.
As a teenager, like she could handle herself anyway.
Yeah, fuck him.
Oh, don't.
Oh,
No.
And we're disintegrating, people.
Yeah, it's all starting to fall
disintegrating
apart.
like molecules.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
Before we
On
go,
that lovely note,
Yes, before we go.
Before we go, Tilduricus sent us a fantastic email that has far too much stuff for us to go into at this point. But we will get to it. There will be talk. There was talk about tonal magic and how that relates to real magic and all sorts. We will absolutely get to that. And it's fodder for a cast of its own, I think.
Nice job, Tori. You gave us another episode.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you.
yeah, it's good because that means I no longer have to keep coming up with some of the ones that come after this series. This is great.
Oh no, keep coming up. Yeah.
There's shit to talk about. What are you talking about?
We've also had a request to do another cast on Vivek because the old one is very old and doesn't have this cast in it, and also apparently was mostly people talking over each other, and it's been so long since we did it, I don't remember it at all.
Which episode?
So let's do another. We're gonna rehash stuff, but that's fine.
I know the first one was Unreliable Narrator, and MK was on that one.
Yeah.
No,
The very
MK was
first
on Lorecast.
MK was on Lorecast.
Yeah, that was the third one.
And days gone by long before my time in the Dawn era.
Yeah, when I was a much younger man. Much younger.
Do you think Michael would be interested in coming to talk about Vivek?
I don't think he would. He's trying to kind of stay out of Elder Scrolls lore officially at the moment. And he's got minis to paint, so the man is busy. But
so many Necrons.
They're
seriously.
So cool.
Yeah, check out his Instagram. He's like legit got fantastic like stuff going on in there. It's really good. And also I do have plans to try to romance him into a cast specifically about world building. And not just about not about Elder Scrolls in particular, but just world building in general. As a sort of like the reason why is that when I was working on Tattered Emelian, he suggested a number of things when we were first starting the world building phase, and every one of them were ideas that I'd never thought of and were all really, really helpful. And I was like, I think more people could use this. So that's kind of what I wanted.
Make it like a creativity workshop.
It's basically, like from him and Daria, I just want them to sit down and go like, what kind of practices or tricks have you? What these 5 cool tricks and that can help world building that
like
jog
active game developers like.
Right,
like they've got some great insights. So
well, the first one, the one I'm thinking of, one of the ones I'm thinking of specifically was he said make a map as soon as possible, and I didn't understand why that was a good idea until we did it, and then we came up with all these great ideas from just like the first person who ran who did it the first time stuck a giant moth ship in like the corner of the map somewhere. We're like, what's with the moth ship? And she was like, I don't know, I just threw it in there. And that's where this whole city developed around it, and like this whole part of like the mod just sprung up around that one little thing that she threw in for no reason at all. And that's good stuff. So yeah, it's gonna be stuff like that. I think so I think we're on schedule for 2 weeks from today. We're gonna do Vermina, Vermina.
I have the list here somewhere, I think.
Which is the last one.
We did Sanguine, we've done Periite.
Yes.
Yep.
We've done all of them.
Vermina is the last one.
Is Vermina the last one?
Yes.
Yep.
Which means we then get to move on to like other minor gods or like god heroes and stuff.
Yeah, actually, we do.
What we did talk about with Sheogorath is I mean, we talked a little bit about like cultural variations, but I had an inkling that I wanted to talk about Sheor in Breton myth, because
and how he's like a bad guy,
well, he seems like a combination of Shor and Sheogorath, and becomes that's always how I've interpreted him. I mean, everyone points to Shor as but we have the Sheogorath, crop failure, which seems kind of crazy.
Crop failure, huh?
Yeah, that's his sphere. I mean,
that's Britain's.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
actually, okay. There's
Oh
more to that,
my,
but we
my
could save
pizza
that for that
positively
cast about
ruined.
the nature of like harvesting
Yeah.
and sides.
That was-
We can.
Yes.
well, I
Yeah.
to
And-
answer the one true goon in chat. Wait, was that the guy mentioned in Badman's Hollow? I think that
Yes.
was. I don't think that was actually Sheor. I think that was
No, it is.
a Daedra Lord pretending to be.
That's who it
Oh.
kind of cons you into thinking that
yeah.
you're doing.
You're
this,
told
yeah.
it's Sheor, but then at the end he's just some like powerful Dramora, and you're
Right.
Yeah,
like,
unless
I think there is a connection there because there's that connection
Ooh.
between Sheogorath
and
and
Leslie
Orgron,
cast would be cool. Also, Ebenard.
but I haven't
Ebenard.
found it.
Yeah,
and-
definitely mentioned.
An Alessia cast. I think we did one, but I'd love to do another one.
yes.
Well,
Yeah.
remember, part of my suggestion was we just sort of revisit a bunch of like either random gods or like early god heroes. So like Alessia, I don't think we've actually done a Pelinal cast properly. I don't think.
No.
Oh,
Mora
haven't we?
House, like there
That's a
might have
shame.
been, or maybe there was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mora House. You could
Not a
maybe
whole
even
lot
do
on Mora House.
Belharza. Like there's Maruk. You know, the guy for whom we take all this naming from. Like there's
Yes.
a whole bunch of stuff like that we could do.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
and-
thanks everybody for
while-
showing up.
Yeah, while we are in the
Oh.
process of doing wrap-ups, if
Yes.
you have any suggestions, questions, whatever,
Thank you.
please email us at selectiveslorecast@gmail.com.
Mhm.
And we will do our best to address them at some point, whether it's in a full cast or in an answer to an email segment
Yep.
that we will throw in somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not
And
like
we
we're
get-
organized.
We get so very excited about these emails
We do.
So- because it's I don't know, it's fun. So
Mhm.
And it's great to
Do
answer
I-
questions from this
Yeah.
community that we have.
Plus, my AOL account pops off. You've got mail, which is always very satisfying.
There you
Who
go.
uses AOL?
And very reminiscent of the 1990s.
Yes, yes. I have not. I have my knowledge of the internet has not really grown since 2000. So yeah. I'm a terrible web
Oh,
developer.
God.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, folks. Thanks very much. Everybody wave.
Bye. everybody.
Bye.